Okay, so picture this. It is June 16th, 1381. You're standing right in the middle of Market Square in Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
And the visual is just, it's arresting. You've got smoke, chaos, a massive bonfire roaring in the center of town. But it's the smell that probably hits you first.
Yeah, it's not wood smoke.
No, it's the smell of burning parchment, animal skin.
We're talking hundreds of years of legal history just going up in flames. And right in the middle of it all, almost orchestrating the scene, is this figure, Margery Starre.
And the sources all call her a beldam,
Ah.
which is such a loaded word, isn't it? To suggest this, frail, hag-like figure.
Tea almost.
Yeah, exactly. But the accounts don't describe a frail old lady. She's dancing.
Oh, she's dancing triumphantly. She's grabbing handfuls of these hot ashes and throwing them into the air, scattering them to the four winds, and she's screaming this line that has somehow survived for 6 centuries.
Away with the learning of clerks. Away with it.
That's the one.
It's so cinematic. But if you just look at it on the surface, it feels like simple anti-intellectualism.
Yeah.
A mob that hates books.
Right, the simple reading.
But when you actually dig into the records from the Peasants Revolt in Cambridge and look at the analysis from historians like Sylvia Federico and Barry Dobson, that bonfire wasn't about hating education at all.
No, not even close. It was a forensic attack on the legal system.
It was about hating paperwork.
Exactly. Margery Starre wasn't trying to stop people from reading. She was trying to break the paper chains that held the entire town of Cambridge captive.
So today, we're going to strip back that crazy mob narrative to figure out why she was dancing in the ashes and what this moment really tells us about the town versus gown war, about legal loopholes, and about the women who helped lead these rebellions.
Because this wasn't just a riot, it was a very targeted strike against the University of Cambridge.
So let's set the scene, because the context here is just so volatile. It's the summer of 1381.
Yeah. The Peasants Revolt is in full swing.
London is already on fire. The rebels have just razed the Savoy Palace, which was John of Gaunt's home.
And that violence just radiates outwards. It hits Cambridgeshire by the middle of June. But the makeup of the mob in Cambridge is what's really fascinating. It's not your stereotypical peasants with pitchforks.
Right. The records mention the gang from Suffolk, some locals coming back from the riots in London. But it's the leadership structure that really jumped out at me. This wasn't a leaderless rabble just breaking windows.
No, it was organized. Very organized.
The mob was being led by the mayor of Cambridge.
Which just completely changes how you see the event, doesn't it? When the mayor is leading the riot, it's not an uprising against civic order.
It is the civic order.
It is. It's the town mobilizing against a rival power.
And that rival is the university.
The University of Cambridge in 1381 was, well, suffocating is probably the right word for it. It wasn't just a school. It was a landlord, it was a police force, and it was a court system all rolled into one.
This is that classic town versus gown dynamic, but on steroids. I think today we might assume a university town loves the college. It brings in money, prestige.
The good sports team,
Right, but back then, the university was basically an occupying force.
They had regulatory power over everyone in town. They could police your behavior, they could set prices at the market, control who could trade. But the real point of friction, the thing that likely drove the mayor to side with the rioters, was something called the benefit of clergy.
An ultimate legal loophole.
It really was. Basically, if you are a scholar or a clerk or a priest, you are exempt from the normal courts. So if a student assaulted a local shopkeeper, that student wouldn't face the king's justice.
He'd face a church court.
An ecclesiastical court, yeah. Which was notoriously lenient.
A slap on the wrist.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So you have the shopkeeper seeing a student commit a crime, theft, assault, whatever, and get nothing, while that same shopkeeper would probably hang for the same offense.
So it creates this two-tiered society. If you're a townsperson, you're not looking at the university as a center of learning. You're looking at it as a fortress of royal privilege that is totally immune to consequences.
Exactly. And because they had the king's protection, there was no legal recourse. You couldn't sue them. You couldn't arrest them. The resentment just built and built for decades.
So when the violence finally explodes on June 15th, the day before our bonfire, they have very specific targets in mind. They aren't just smashing random windows.
No, this is surgical. They go for the institutions. They hit Great St. Mary's Church first.
Which seems odd until you realize that's where the university kept its paperwork.
Exactly. The bulls, the papal decrees, the charters, the title deeds, they dragged them all out. But the main event, the attack that really explains the town's anger, was the one on Corpus Christi College.
Why Corpus Christi in particular? I mean, Cambridge had other colleges.
It did, but Corpus Christi was a massive landowner in the town, and they were, frankly, terrible landlords. There was this one specific grievance that keeps coming up in the sources: candle rents.
This detail really stood out to me. It sounds so petty, doesn't it? Candle rent.
It does, but when you look at the economics, it was just this constant, intrusive drain. The college owned a bunch of houses and charged rent based on the number of wax tapers candles that were used in the
So the
house.
more light you need to live your life, the more you owe the college.
It's a very rigid, very controlling way of extracting wealth. Plus, Corpus Christi had political ties to John of Gaunt.
Ah, the big bad of the whole revolt. The man they blamed for the poll tax.
The very same. So Corpus Christi came to represent everything the town hated: the university, the church, and the corrupt crown. So on June 15th, the mob attacks.
And it's worth pointing out the mob included some students.
That's the twist, isn't it? Even some of the gown turned against the college. They gutted the buildings. They broke down doors, stole the college plate, the silverware and valuables.
But the silver wasn't the main prize.
No, the priority was what they called the muniments.
The legal documents.
Chests full of rent rolls, charters, and deeds. All the paper that said, "You owe us money," or "We own this land,"
Corpus Christi later sued for £80 in damages.
which is, what, roughly 50,000 pounds today? It's a huge sum.
So they wreck the college, they grab the valuables, and they drag these heavy chests of paper to the market square. And that brings us back to June 16th, the day of the bonfire, and to Margery Starre.
Right, the summer of blood, as one historian calls it. And in the midst of all this violence, we get this moment of what Dan Jones calls jubilant vandalism.
It's just so interesting that the history books tend to focus on the men Wat Tyler, John Ball the mayor. But in this one iconic incident, the camera zooms right in on a woman. And she's not just a participant, she's the orchestrator.
She is the absolute focal point. She's the one scattering the ashes, and that cry of hers, "Away with the learning of clerks." We really need to unpack that.
Because learning makes it sound like she's attacking knowledge itself. Like she wants everyone to be ignorant. It feeds right into that Dark Ages mob stereotype.
That's the traditional kind of snobbish reading of it, yes. The ignorant peasants destroying wisdom. But scholars like Suzanne Sarah Thomas argue that we need to think about what learning actually meant to a 14th century townsperson.
They weren't burning poetry, were they? They weren't burning philosophy or medical texts.
No, they were burning the university's statutes. To someone like Margery Starre, a piece of parchment with Latin on it wasn't a vehicle for enlightenment. It was a weapon. It was the document that could evict you from your home. It was the paper that said you owed candle rent.
So learning, in this context, is really just shorthand for bureaucracy.
Precisely, it's the establishment. The historian Barry Dobson points out that burning records was a popular activity all across England during the revolt. They called it burning records and writings in the House of Justice.
There is a deep irony here, though. Another historian, Edmund King, he points out that the mob probably didn't realize how little actual learning was in those chests.
That's the funny part. They thought they were destroying the secret knowledge of the clerks, the almost mystical source of their power. But in reality, they were mostly just burning invoices.
Boring administrative data.
Very boring. But the symbolism holds up. To them, the administration was the oppression. The learning was the ability to write down the rules that kept them poor.
And Margery's role here, it connects to a much bigger, often overlooked story about women in the revolt.
It really does. Sylvia Federico points out that women are all over the judicial records from 1381. They're not just bystanders or victims.
They're listed as maintainers of rebel bands.
Instigators, accomplices. Federico argues that Margery's story is often treated like a colorful little anecdote, a side detail, but it actually highlights the fact that women had their own specific grievances against the system.
It just completely challenges that beldam narrative. Calling her a crazy old woman is a way of minimizing what she was actually doing. She was a political agitator.
She was engaging in political theater, it was a performance, and there's a fantastic literary parallel that Suzanne Sarah Thomas draws. She compares Margery Starre to Chaucer's Wife of Bath.
Oh, I love this connection. We all remember the Wife of Bath as this boisterous, dominant character, but her relationship with books and texts is really adversarial.
Absolutely. Her fifth husband, Jankian, he's a clerk, a scholar, And he loves to torment her by reading from his Book of Wicked Wives.
Right, a big book just cataloging all the supposed sins of women throughout history.
Exactly. He uses the text, the learning, to control and shame her. So what does she do?
She rips the pages out.
She rips the pages out and then makes him burn the book. It's the same energy as Margery Starre.
It is. It's a complete rejection of text as a tool of patriarchal control. I mean, in the Middle Ages, writing was power, and that power was overwhelmingly male and clerical.
So when the wife of Bath rips up the book, or when Margery Starre burns the charters, they're both effectively saying, I do not consent to the authority of this piece of paper.
It's a way of saying, if the book says I'm lesser, or if this charter says I owe you money I can't pay, then the book has to go.
It also reminds me of that famous line from Shakespeare's Henry VI from the Jack Cade rebellion scenes.
The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers.
That's it. Which is often quoted as a joke, but in the context of the play, it's a deeply revolutionary statement.
Thomas Shippey makes that exact comparison to Margery Starre, doesn't he?
He does. It's that same deep-seated fear that a man with a pen and some ink can ruin your life faster than a man with a sword. Margery is the embodiment of that anxiety.
She's fighting the abstraction of power. You can fight a soldier. It's much harder to fight a deed to a house.
Unless you can burn it.
So, looking back at the aftermath, the bonfire burns out. The king's forces eventually regain control. What happened to Cambridge?
Well, it's the usual story. Order was restored. And the university's privileges weren't just restored, they were actually strengthened in the years that followed.
Of course, the empire strikes back.
The town definitely lost the war against the gown, but the memory of it stuck around. The image of the mayor leading a mob and an old woman dancing on the ashes, it exposed just how fragile the university's authority really was.
It all relied on paper.
And paper is very, very flammable. It's a stark reminder that our institutions only really function as long as we all agree to respect the documentation.
When that social contract snaps, the archives are one of the first things to go.
Exactly.
I think that's why Margery Starre's story still resonates, almost 650 years later. She didn't have an army, she didn't have a title, she's just had a match.
And she used it to physically dismantle the abstract things that were controlling her community. It's such a powerful story about the intersection of literacy, law, and class.
It is ironic, though. Her whole goal was to destroy the learning of clerks, but now she's trapped inside it. The only reason we even know her name is because the clerks wrote it down in the legal records.
She's been preserved by the very bureaucracy she tried to incinerate. But at least now, thanks to historians like Federico and Thomas, we're reading those records in a different way. We aren't just seeing a beldam or a witch, we're seeing a revolutionary.
It does leave you with a thought for our own time. We are so much more documented than 14th century Cambridge. Our debts, our deeds, our very identities, they're not on parchment in a wooden chest anymore.
No, they're on servers. They're in the cloud.
So if Margery Starre were here today, she wouldn't be in Market Square with a torch.
No, she'd be looking for a magnetic degausser, or maybe just the delete key.
It makes you wonder if a community today felt that same level of candle rent oppression, that same feeling of a rigged system. What is the modern equivalent of that bonfire? Is it a cyber attack? Is it wiping a database clean?
The medium changes, right? Parchment to silicon. But the impulse is identical. Erase the record, erase the debt, erase the control.
The power of the record versus the power of the people. We'll leave you to chew on that one. Thanks for walking us through the smoke today.
A pleasure, as always.
And to our listener, thanks for joining the deep dive. We'll see you next time.